The undisputed king of the shooters in the early 90s was definitely the TurboGrafx-16, there's no arguing that. But since so many people didn't have the joy of playing it, this fact was often lost on most. Thankfully, the Sega Genesis was also host to a fair amount of shoot-'em-up games, and Renovation Software brought many of these games over to North America. One such game was Vapor Trail, released in 1991. At the time, shoot-'em-ups were nearing their peak of popularity in arcades, and it was still very difficult to bring the actual arcade experience home. But thanks to the sheer power of the Genesis processor, Telenet Japan was actually able to make a very close port to the arcade game, complete with a vertically oriented playfield. And even though it wasn't arcade perfect, the Genesis version of Vapor Trail does still maintain everything that made the arcade game special. In Vapor Trail, you have your choice between 3 different ships. Each of them has their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to firepower and speed, as well as having unique special weapons. It might take a bit of time for you to find out which ship is best for you, but with weapon and speed power-ups throughout the entire game, any one of the 3 ships will suffice. Vapor Trail is also a pretty fast game. You'll find that no matter what plane you choose, enemy bullets will catch up to you really quickly, and it gets really crowded a little later into the game. Thankfully, your fighter has a life gauge, so if you do get hit, you're not going to die straight off the bat. In addition, you also have a life stock as well. While some might view this as being a little too easy, believe me, when the crap hits the fan, it's definitely a lifesaver. Add to the mix limited continues, and you can see why this is a good thing. To help out even more, some enemies drop items to replenish your life as well. If worse does come to worse though, there are ways of getting around the whole blowed up thing. You can execute a roll when your power gauge is maxed out. This will make you invulnerable for a short amount of time, allowing you to avoid any bullets that are about to hit you. This can also be used to take out any enemies that are spewing ungodly amounts of hot red death at you. However, when executing a roll, you can't pick up any power-ups or items, so if you're using a roll to get through enemy shots for that express purpose, it's just a wasted effort. On the weapon front, you have 3 levels of power to go through. Obtaining a weapon power-up will increase the amount of shots that your weapon will fire. Additionally, you can change the weapons that you're firing by obtaining a weapon change canister. By shooting this canister, you can change your weapons from Vulcans, to bombs, to missiles, and finally the Defender, which I can't show you because the interlace is so bad it wouldn't show up. Any power-up changes that you obtain prior to changing your weapons will also carry over to the new weapon as well. Of all of these weapons, I prefer the bombs because they clear out enemy shots in the blast radius as well. Finally, there's the S-Unit, which gives you a super special weapon to use. The S-Unit is different depending on which ship you choose, and once again, it boils down to personal preference. With the S-Unit equipped, you can also press the roll button to unleash a screen-clearing bomb, taking out all enemies and shots in one go. This is incredibly useful in very tight situations, but in doing so you must sacrifice the S-Unit entirely. With all of this at your disposal, all you need is a bit of stage memorization with a combination of patience and practice to see it through to the end. As far as shoot-'em-up games go, especially today, Vapor Trail isn't especially complex. It doesn't have any big fancy chains, multipliers, or special score points. Heck, it doesn't even have a score ranking system. But what it does have is very fun gameplay. Thankfully, there's also a 2-player cooperative mode as well, which actually goes a long way despite how basic this shoot-'em-up actually is. For those of you out there who think this game is too easy though, there is also a hard mode available. Your life gauge is dropped from 3 to 2, just like the arcade version, and stuff flies around the screen much quicker. On the technical side of things, there will be places where you'll find excessive slowdown as well. This can be a blessing at times, but for the most part it's just a bother. On the presentation side, Vapor Trail is very faithful to its arcade counterpart. However, as with most arcade-to-home conversions, some elements are missing from the Genesis cart. In addition, the visuals aren't quite as clear or as colorful as the arcade version. On the sound front though, the Genesis soundtrack seems to stand out more than the arcade version, and to me it actually sounds better. As good as the soundtrack does sound though, more stage music variety is sorely needed. Vapor Trail actually opted for different boss music rather than different stage music, and I think I might have preferred it the other way around. But at least with that lack of musical diversity, what's there is still pretty darn good. On the other side of the coin though, the actual voice samples suck! They're probably my biggest complaint about this game. I know the Genesis sound chip isn't exactly the strongest, but come on. I've heard much better from the Genesis in other games. So, with a faithful arcade-to-home conversion and fun gameplay mechanics, just how does Vapor Trail stack up? Let's take a look. Well, looks like Bullet Heaven's viewers continue to have good taste. Control-wise, Vapor Trail is pretty much a success. However, since the tightest control is dependent on speed power-ups, it does lose a point. I'm going to start calling this Gradius Syndrome because whenever you die, you end up feeling way too sluggish. Vapor Trail is also reasonably long at 6 stages. However, its true length comes from how long it takes for you to clear the hard mode or how much you get out of the 2-player. On the challenge front, it's not a particularly challenging game, but the hard mode makes up for this. In terms of visuals, the graphics are fairly solid, just not as good as the arcade version. And while the music is pretty darn good, the lack of different stage music and the terrible voice samples drag down the sound score. And finally, for the ingenuity, it really isn't all that ingenious. There are some interesting twists with the S-Unit and the roll mechanic, but otherwise, it's very by the book. That's not to say it's bad, it's just not mind-blowing. These days, you can get the North American version of Vapor Trail on Genesis for as little as $5 or as much as $35, depending how complete you want your copy. And since it's a solid game, I do recommend Vapor Trail on the Genesis. Just make sure to buy low.